All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning. To officially welcome back Kelly Krauskopf as President of Basketball Business Operations for the Indiana.
What if the one person destined to launch the WNBA into another stratosphere is also the same person many believe the league has struggled to fully embrace? It sounds dramatic, even paranoid at first, but a series of shocking on-court incidents, bitter off-court commentary, and controversial decisions from powerful institutions have left millions of fans asking whether Caitlyn Clark's rise has exposed a deeper conflict inside women's professional basketball. The truth behind this saga is more complicated than a simple story of a rookie adjusting to the pros. It is a story about fame, power, resentment, culture, business, and a league wrestling with the consequences of its own rapid transformation. When Caitlyn Clark was selected first overall by the Indiana Fever, it was treated as a historic turning point. She was not just another talented rookie entering the league. She was already a cultural force. A player who had shattered records, dominated headlines, and transformed the visibility of women's college basketball. Her games drew massive audiences, sometimes rivaling or surpassing major men's sporting events. She brought attention, ticket demand, television ratings, sponsorships, and a level of mainstream buzz the WNBA had rarely seen from a single incoming player. The so-called Caitlyn Clark effect was immediate. Ticket prices surged. Arenas sold out. The league gained unprecedented visibility. Her arrival created the sense that the WNBA was entering a new era. Everything appeared perfectly set for a triumphant beginning. Instead, what followed felt to many like a ruthless initiation. From the opening games of her rookie season, it became obvious that the professional level would be far more physical. Defenders were stronger, faster, more experienced, and far less forgiving. But to many viewers, what Clark faced seemed to go beyond ordinary professional toughness. It often looked personal. Every bump, shove, collision, and hard screen appeared to carry a message. You have not earned comfort here. That feeling exploded into public controversy during the now infamous game against the Chicago Sky. The play involving Kennedy Carter instantly became one of the defining moments of the season. To Clark's supporters, it was not simply a hard basketball play. It looked like a deliberate cheap shot delivered away from the ball. The type of moment that symbolized the hostility many fans already believed she was facing. The reaction was immediate. Social media erupted. Analysts debated whether Clark was being targeted. Fans argued that the league's initial response lacked urgency. The fact that the foul was only upgraded after intense public backlash only strengthened the belief that the WNBA was not eager to protect its biggest new star. That incident quickly became bigger than a single foul. It turned into a symbol. A lightning rod for frustration, resentment, and the growing perception that Clark's arrival had triggered emotions across the league that went far beyond basketball. As the season unfolded, another narrative began to take shape. Observers noticed possessions in which Clark appeared open on the perimeter, calling for the ball only to be ignored. Clips circulated online. Fans dissected every possession. Some argued the Indiana Fever's chemistry simply had not developed yet. Others began pushing a darker theory, that Clark was being quietly frozen out, not only by opponents, but at times by her own teammates. Whether that interpretation was fair or exaggerated, the perception itself became powerful. Frustrated body language, awkward on-court moments, and post-game comments from veterans fueled the speculation. What might have been ordinary growing pains for a rebuilding team began to look, in the eyes of many fans, like something more fractured and emotionally charged. Then, there was the media environment surrounding her. Clark's entry into the league brought enormous attention, but it also exposed long-standing tensions. Veteran players and pundits often pushed back against the idea that she should be treated differently. Diana Taurasi's now famous warning that reality is coming became one of the most widely discussed remarks of the season. To some, it was simply honest analysis from a legend who understood the gap between college and the pros. To others, it came across as a dismissive and almost territorial response to the arrival of a player commanding an unprecedented amount of hype. This is where the conversation became more complicated. Clark did not enter an empty space. She entered a league built over decades by black women whose greatness often went underappreciated by the broader sports world. For many observers, the discomfort was not only about basketball. It was also about who gets celebrated, who gets marketed, and who gets positioned as the face of a league whose foundations were built long before Clark arrived. That created a volatile mix of admiration, frustration, and cultural tension. To many veterans and longtime supporters of the league, Clark represented opportunity. But to others, she also symbolized a media machine that suddenly appeared to value the league more only when a white superstar became its central attraction. That tension was never going to be simple. Still, the controversy reached another level when Clark was left off Team USA's Olympic roster for the Paris Games. That decision stunned fans around the world. Here was the most talked-about basketball player in women's sports, the biggest ratings draw, and arguably the most visible athlete in the game. And yet she was not selected. Official explanations centered on experience, roster balance, and team chemistry. But to many outside observers, those reasons felt unsatisfying. Her omission was interpreted as more than a basketball decision. It looked to critics like a powerful act of gatekeeping, a signal from the sports establishment that popularity and momentum would not be enough to fast-track her into its most protected circles. Whether fair or not, the Olympic snub intensified the feeling that Clark's rise was being managed, resisted, or deliberately slowed. And then came the silence from those closest to her. Fans expected the Indiana Fever to respond forcefully. They expected public outrage, a strong defense of their franchise cornerstone, and a clear statement that their player deserved better. Instead, what they got felt muted and corporate. The organization's tone was measured, cautious, and diplomatic. For many supporters, that silence was its own message. It suggested that when Clark needed visible backing from the people who benefited most from her presence, the franchise chose restraint over confrontation. Rather than openly challenging the institutions and politics surrounding the situation, the Fever appeared content to protect relationships and avoid conflict. That decision, more than any single foul or roster choice, convinced many fans that Clark was being treated first as a business asset and only second as a player who deserved forceful protection. And that is what makes this story so fascinating. At the center of it all is a league caught between two forces: explosive commercial growth and an entrenched culture shaped by years of struggle, pride, and hard-earned identity. Clark represents money, visibility, and scale. Her impact on ratings, ticket sales, sponsorships, and national interest is undeniable. She is, by every modern business metric, one of the most valuable figures the sport has ever seen. But she also represents change. Fast, disruptive, uncomfortable change. To some, that change is a gift. To others, it feels like a challenge to the league's hierarchy, history, and sense of ownership over its own story. That is the real tension at the heart of the Caitlyn Clark phenomenon. This is not just about one hard foul, one roster decision, or one rookie season. It is about a sport confronting a moment of transformation it may not be fully prepared to handle. The WNBA desperately wants the growth Clark brings, but it also seems uneasy with the cultural upheaval that follows her everywhere. That leaves the league at a crossroads. One path leads toward unprecedented popularity, global visibility, and financial growth powered in large part by a once-in-a-generation superstar. The other path clings more tightly to tradition, hierarchy, and gatekeeping, even at the risk of alienating new fans and wasting a historic opportunity. So what happens next? That is the question hovering over the entire sport. Is Caitlyn Clark simply enduring the unavoidable trial by fire that every transformational athlete faces? Or is she being forced through a uniquely intense resistance born from jealousy, politics, cultural tension, and institutional discomfort? Whatever the answer, the consequences reach far beyond one player. Because how the WNBA handles Caitlyn Clark will not just shape her future, it may determine the future direction of the entire league.